Okay, guys, thank you for joining us this evening. So, while we wait for some of the speakers to join us, because I can see Doing Sola is up and Olusegun is also up as a speaker, we'll be waiting for the others to join us. So, let's briefly talk about what's happening in Africa. I mean, Africa, which is a continent blessed with abundance of renewable energy resources, such as wind, solar, hydropower, and renewable energy resources. I mean, God has blessed Africa with all of this greatness. However, the continent mostly depends on fossil fuels. When we look at our consumption of oils, coal, I mean, falling down of trees because of urbanization, and looking at how the population has been increasing exponentially lately. All of these activities have actually been releasing gases into the air, which is then trapped by sunlight. Then that's the whole greenhouse effect thing happening. And of course, while the climate is very unstable and getting warmer and warmer by the day. So we'll be looking at some of all of these challenges and how to accelerate and transition to renewable energy resources, why this is crucial and important for a sustainable future. Today, we have some of our guests who are going to be speaking on these issues and how we can tackle these challenges. I have Doing Sola already here and Olusegun. So, guys, I would like for you to introduce yourself so we can kick off the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Doin Sola Ogunye. I am the founder of the Recycling Scheme for Women and Youth Empowerment, and I'm also the founder of the Kids Beach Garden, which is the first sustainable beach in Lagos and Nigeria. I started off in 2009 with a passion to recycle in Lagos State, and for 13 years later, I'm sitting on different boards talking about the same issue that we're going to be talking about here, recycling. I'm also very passionate about the environment. I have planted trees in different schools, and we have under our belt a 35,000 tree garden in Baduri.
Thank you, Doing Sola. Thanks for joining us. We have Chigozie also on.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Chiagoze. Happy to join you all. I work around climate change and renewable energy processes within the international space, and really happy to discuss this in the Nigerian context, especially within Lagos at this time.
Thanks for joining us, Chigozie. We have Olusegun. Olusegun, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Oluwasegun Ulusojojalade. The co-founder, one of the co-founders of Jomo Climate Change Initiative. We are a youth-led NGO focused on raising and eco-conscious generations of Nigerians. We do cleanups. We go to schools to educate the younger generation about climate change, green habits, and we've had sensitization campaigns across communities in Agege and also around Ojodu. So I also have some affiliations with because I'm quite climate friendly. I'm everything about climate. So I work with some international organizations like Change Reality, Climate Reality, the Climate Reality Project, and also Yongo. And that's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that brief introduction. So I'm going to take this back to Doing Salam. I can see our speakers are so passionate about the climate change. And Doing Salam mentioned about going to schools. Olusegun also mentioned about going to school. Shega, I'll come back to you, but let me go to Doing Salam first. So how was it planting trees in schools? How was the students? What was their feeling like? Because I know sometimes students like to stay under shades, and we have very few trees these days in Lagos. So how was it like the whole experience?
Yeah, the experience has been very wonderful working with children. We work with children in public and private schools. And the most important thing for us to do is to catch the children in their formative years so that they can understand the essence of what they're doing and the significance of what they're doing as well. And it's been amazing. Working with children, we currently finished a 100 tree planting project in Bara Junior School here in Etiosa, and it was fantastic. The growth rate of the trees means that the children are watering it, they're taking care of the trees, and they want to know more about the things needed to grow trees in communities. Also, while we do this with the kids, it's also important to know that you're actually sparking something, it's a catalyst for something they can use in the future. For example, I studied law, I'm a lawyer, but because I have been learning, how to plant trees and how to grow trees, it's already become part of me, and it's a skill that I can actually use. So when we're teaching the children these things, we also have it in mind that these children can use this skill in future to earn and to make a living. Thank you.
Great job doing Salah. Great job for nurturing the kids to teach them about the advantage of planting trees in the society, in the environment. Olusegun, you talked about sensitization. I mean, what was the experience like going into those areas to sensitize people about the climate?
It was a wonderful experience. I could tell I could tell that the well I say the residents, because I would say our focus was more of the Oniwire on the Oniwire community. So we had done a cleanup and we realized that 2 weeks after, these guys were still there going to dump their trash at in front of a primary school. And we went into the so we decided to take the other route instead of just doing a cleanup. Let's go through the community. Let's talk to these people. Let's understand what are the issues going on here. And they were really receptive because they were like, yes, they were ready to lament. And while engaging with the community, we realized that everyone was trying to shift blames. Oh yes, the government. And when you go to the government will say, oh, it's the people. When you go to the people will know it's the PSP guys. So in a way, we have to educate them that okay, this you need to take responsibility for your environment, because if you keep expecting someone else to do it for you, everyone will keep expecting the other person to do it, and no one does it. So we had to communicate and bring it down to their level, and because most times when we talk about climate change, talk about environmental sustainability, it's all in the high level. So we had to bring it down to the Yoruba level, explain how this could cause malaria, clogging the drainage could cause water to be on the floor, delay. So we had to just explain everything to them. So yeah, so we had to connect the message to their reality and things they could understand. And while connecting, I believe that they actually reset it and they understood why they need. So they had to start telling people. They told us we're going to take action. We are going to tell people. They're going to even watch the dump site to ensure that people were not throwing trash there, and they will report them to the authorities. So we just our mission as Jomo Climate Change was to just drive that consciousness about the environment. So that is, and we're able to achieve that. So I believe we had a very good outing when we went to the community, and we've done it like twice. So
That's great.
it's something for me.
That's
Yeah.
great. So they've been keeping watch at who is dumping what and who is packing what not
Yeah.
there. That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have another of our speaker joining us, Adeleye. Welcome. Welcome to the space. Please do a little bit of introduction of yourself.
Thank you. My name is Adilay Odebumi, and I'm the CEO of Packham Technology. It's a digital marketplace for waste, recycling, and smart enforcement. And I think we're a startup, and the goal is to create scarcity in waste. Thank you. It's nice being here.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So, I'll go back to Chigozie because we've been going around with the list of questions. You said you're enthusiastic about climate change. So, what do you think about our environment? I mean, just looking at Lagos State lately, there's been a couple of change around the corner. I would not deny the fact that things have absolutely changed in Lagos. What would you say concerning the change in regards to climate?
I would say, of course, there's been in the last few years there's been slow progress in some way, generally in the country, but in specifics to Lagos, there's been a few changes, but there's a lot more to be done. We know that at this time of the year, start to expect the rain. It's coming through. I think the first ones are already in, and you could see the impact in the states. Lagos is an adaptation disaster waiting to happen if more measures are not taken to really address the situation. I think probably there's a lot of strategy going on, but it needs to come in as fast as possible. For example, the incessant floods that are happening in many parts of Lagos every year, it's not the norm. It can be mitigated with a lot of embankments. Some of the infrastructure that is coming on needs to have a lot more thinking that goes into that around how do you sand fill wetlands, how do you sand fill water areas, what are the pros and cons, how much can they last without backfiring in terms of longevity. Of course, there's a lot of islands that you can build like that would last for so long, but then you need to be sure around the environment that you're doing it. Looking at the land mass is quite small, the population is enormous, a lot of pressure on this environment. It needs to manage this side by side with the population. There's progress for sure, but in terms of the magnitude of what is required is still quite infinitesimal to what is required. Of course, it takes a lot of resources. And when you're running a government, you have education to cater for, you have health, you have a whole bunch of issues, infrastructure, roads, and the rest of them. It's not easy. It's not easy to really align these priorities, but it's important that people are safe. That it's not ideal that we still lose lives in Nigeria to flooding. We know it happens every year. We still expect that to happen, and we do nothing about it. There's no even outrage about the number of people that die on floods. That is a red flag, and I think that is somewhere that government should make more investments. Should be very careful to do some due diligence in terms of projects that are done, and take it from there. Around the environment, of course, there's I know there's some progress around making an energy waste to energy facility, how that operates. I think when that is operating at the optimal level, then you could begin to see a lot of progress. I like the fact that we have a lot of people on this call who are walking around making waste scarce. I really love that line, and I think the uptake in converting waste to energy would go a long way to removing those waste from the streets and from the road, and also empowering people, because at the center of transitioning or sustainable development or climate resilient cities is that the people who are the core of driving it, whether they are the workers, whether they're just normal people who are going about their businesses, you have to leave this in your subconscious, and that makes the whole difference in the general frame of things.
Thank you so much for that contribution, and also the advice to the Lagos State government. This is the reason why this is being put together, for everybody to be inclusive of this sustainable development goal, because Lagos is like for everyone right now. So we all have a part to play in sustaining our environment and ensuring that it's safe enough. You also talked about the sand filling and wetlands and drainage and all of that stuff. So with what the government is doing, we can see that there are constructions going on here and there. So, but the human factor to managing all of this, because I remember a few years ago, the government put in place some of the ways to manage waste, and you would see people still dumping refuse, just like Olusegun said, like just dumping it there and not being responsible enough. Adele, you said you're a digital market space or place for waste and making sense of waste. And Chigozie highlighted how it's good that we're converting waste to energy. But with the national renewable energy contribution, like looking at the on-grid energy, we are at 12%. What is the current contribution of these renewable energy sources in Lagos, and how can it be increased to reduce dependency on fossil fuel, like burning this and ensuring that we don't have to just depend on fossil fuel for everything? So how do we convert our waste and make sense of it?
I thank you. I think in the situation like this, we seriously need to give context to it, and also giving context to what we're doing. We also seriously need to look at it in that most times going the route of this is where the world is going is probably always not the right thing to go. We've had so much conversation about green energy, green this, green that. We've had so much about the concept that Germany is the one leading to in the nearest future. There'll be zero dependency on fossil fuel whatsoever. And we also see the challenge that the Russia-Ukraine war has brought, even to Germany. Now, there are green energy, green this. It's like it's no more. So I have not seen, except I'm being very convinced, that in the very near future, we are going to be able to not to depend on fossil fuel. I have not seen that. So these are concepts about, and we've also seen right here in Lagos, where Tesla is also using generator. So it's like something, because we need to tell ourselves the truth. The infrastructure to really go green is huge. The infrastructure to deploy all this green energy, green this and green that is huge. So the question is the state ready? So the transition is going to be extremely gradual. For Lagos State today, apart from vehicles that are coming in that are electric powered vehicles, which are still very low, I have not seen where we can easily just boast that yes, we're going that route for now. And again, we've had so much conversation about converting waste to energy. How do we want to achieve that? What infrastructure are we also going to put on ground to ensure that this energy can be evenly distributed, well distributed, and all that? So I think the scalability of it are also a challenge. Can it also reduce dependency on current energy infrastructure? And I don't think all of these things are really viable. So I think our focus should be first on what we can solve and how best we can solve them than trying to just go global. So our situation may have global context, but we should try and much as to localize it and give the best to our local situation.
All right, Mr. Le, you talked about scalability, and you're also not giving us this positive response. You're saying we're going to depend on fossil fuel for a long time. I mean, for someone who is trying to make sense of waste and, of course, creating a digital marketplace for waste, this is not a positive energy. Oh. I'm just putting that out there because we're supposed to be looking at how
Right.
to solve these issues. Let me move to Chigozie. What do you think about our dependency on fossil fuel and looking at how we're on 12% on the grid? Do you think that we can ever, like in matter of time, we can go off the grid and reduce our dependency on this fossil fuel?
Yeah, so we have to be quite realistic about the approach we take to reducing our dependency on fossil fuels. Yes, if you look at other countries like Germany and Saudi Arabia, you would see that there is a lot of investment in the technology and infrastructure to move in green technology. Yes, in green technology, it's a very conscious and intentional, I would say, investment, and it's not going to be done only by the government or the government, but it involves getting the private companies and the private institutions to also commit to this. So there are bonds, there are a lot of green bonds and investment there at the international level to fund green technologies. Because one thing is when you start a technology, green technology is quite emerging. So in the initial phase of developing technologies, you spend a lot of capital. So my advice is yes, we need to move into green technology. And we need to get more greener fuel sources or power sources. But we currently have to depend on fossil fuel to get those done. Like giving the example of, I remember someone I can recall the example of Tesla cars being powered by generator or Tesla being powered by generator it shows that yes, there are green technologies available, but as a country, we've not invested so well into the infrastructure to sustain such technology. So I think an investment into the infrastructure would also help out. Then another thing the government or we could do as Lagos State is also create that sense. We have to change the mindset of people because moving from using charcoal, using fuel, going to buy fuel to power up your car, power up your appliances at home. It's going to be it takes a mental shift. Why can't I was just coming to you and I'm explaining, oh, you don't need to buy fuel. You just need to get something like it takes a lifestyle to live green. It's not just yes, I'm turning green. It is a conscious effort. And I'll give an example because now it depends on what we have. As you said, we need to look at our environment. So we wanted to do a project at the Okearo farms, and it was a biogas reactor. We wanted to go into bio clean energy. That was one of the projects I wanted to do while in school. I was so passionate about it. But I realized that to get the power generated from biogas is not you can't sustain it alone. It can't power. You can't just rely on biogas alone. So what they do in developed countries is that they mix they support their national grid. So while supporting national grid, they are developing their infrastructure. They use carbon capture. They use biogas, they use wind energy, they use solar. Everything is connected to the grid to support. So they have downtimes so there are times where they go solely on solar or wind, depending on because these new renewable energy sources are although they are always constant in nature, but they have their own deficiencies and their strong times and strong points and weaknesses. So it has to be a complementing structure. And the only way we can develop this infrastructure is to also invest in the education and the education. Like we need to do more research in Nigeria to understand our problems from our own perspective, because we can't just get solutions from the US and other countries and just deploy them here. They may not be sustainable. So I just believe if we invest in changing the mindset of people in Lagos State and Nigeria and Africa as a whole, will get that if we invest in the technology and infrastructure using the funds we get from our revenue from selling crude oil and fossil fuels, we can start developing those sustainable structures. And when we also invest in the educational sector and we tap into the creative mindset. One thing personally I know about Africa and Nigeria is that our greatest resource is not our oil, not our mineral resources, but the human beings we have in Nigeria and in Africa. They are the most intelligent people. Put us in any space in the world, we would shine. We would make the best use of it. So those are like my three advices or solutions to moving from fossil fuel into greener sources.
Thank you so much for that contribution. That was from Shegun. So I'll be moving to Chigozie. I mean, we've heard about the solution. So Shegun advised that we look at what we do in our own local environment, not taking from what people outside are doing, which is good. But then I'm looking at the solar power because we're looking for how we can transit from using all of this fossil fuel, which is actually injurious to not just the environment but also to our health. What do you think we can do to transition from using this fossil fuel to renewable energy resources? Because when you look at solar, it's kind of very unstable. I mean, today there will be sun, tomorrow there will not be sun. So how do we manage this?
Yeah, thank you. I think we have a lot of options. I think some of the colleagues already mentioned it before. We have a lot of waste in the country that we can convert to energy in multiple folds. Most of the things we're doing now is gathering waste and just putting them in dump sites. When we actually do waste management, which involves using all facets of the waste to convert them into productive use, some will be for energy, some will be for recycling, upcycling, and the rest of them, then you will get the entire value chain of that waste. When you do that, then you have to get some other forms of energy from the waste. So we could do that. That is one component. Around solar, the way which you mentioned is a bit inconsistent. I think it depends on how you see it. For a country like Nigeria, it should have very significant solar energy all year round. In countries in Europe where, of course, you get less sun in parts of the year, they're able to sustain with some parts of their energy with using solar at the optimal level. And it's very efficient in some ways. So knowing that Nigeria has even higher solar irradiation all year round should mean that we should be able to really take a lot of energy to invest strongly on that. I think I did read, I did some analysis in the past, I think probably over half a decade ago, and I saw there were some. I think it was Financial International in Nigeria, or some organization like that that did a work around studying what impact it will have if Nigeria invested a lot on solar. And I knew that from that analysis, if we invested, if we try to convert 1% of our land mass to cover it with solar panels, we're going to produce approximately 600,000 megawatts of electricity. And how much do we need to be sufficiently electrified would be around 50,000 megawatts. We're currently shuttling between 5,000 to 6,000 megawatts, and we don't even have capacity to transmit all of those. So solar is a huge component that we are not optimizing because we're not producing solar panels in Nigeria. We have tariffs on solar imports, which makes it more difficult for people to deploy at homes because it's more expensive. And we seem to have not strategized to bring in companies that will make the heavy investment on producing solar with our local raw materials in the country to serve the market, especially in the global south. And again, there's also the part around the wind energy that we've not really explored. This huge potential in that, especially when you are having water bodies around in Lagos. It seems like a missed opportunity not to have this. Of course, you have to consider space, but you can do all of this maximizing space at the optimum level. You could also do this, put this over water to be able to maximize space. We're already doing hydro at a very good level. That itself can also be optimized very efficiently. There are also other innovative means that we can use to manage our energy. We need to first of all put the infrastructures in place to make sure that energy can be democratized, that people can produce the energy that they use, and people can also make a living from producing excess energy that they now feed back into the national grid for the government to further distribute. I like to talk about energy democracy a lot because it really empowers people. It puts energy diversification in a people-centered approach, in a people-centric approach, that people can generate themselves, use the ones they can, and then transfer the rest into the national grid. But for you to do this, you need to have a very structured system where it is easy to measure who is doing what and how much you're transmitting and how much the government owes you in this sense. And this can also come with a lot of incentives that people are encouraged to really do this. At this moment, I know there's a bill that has a law that has been signed by the government to decentralize energy generation. That is great. It gives the states leeway to be able to do a lot of work around this. But also we need to get it to citizens that they're able to do this themselves without being bothered. They can disconnect from the government sources and provide independent energy sources for themselves, and then be able to even sell back to government if they have excess. So this also is another component that we may want to pursue. But this requires a lot of so most of the policy are in place, but enforcement it's very important. You don't just make policy to be on paper. You want it to work for people and to work also for the planet. So we need to be able to enforce. If government says they are paying A, B, C, or D to people who generate electricity, they should be able to pay that and fulfill that obligation. Once there's a renege on any part of that, then it becomes a big problem in the entire value chain or in that production line. So I think we have a lot of options really. As Nigeria, we're blessed in many folds. We have a lot of options to explore, and anyone we explore, we can independently fully function on that in any of these options that are beyond fossil fuel. But also, fossil fuel is not going away today. We're not going to stop using fossil fuel tomorrow. We need to plan for that. Currently, we are heavily dependent on this. We're trying to transition into liquefied natural gas. And from there, we then go forward to then abandoning the entire fossil fuel energy. Looking at Dangote's refinery in Lagos, it shows an indication that Nigeria is not living that trajectory soon. And that means we have to be able to carefully craft out how we want to transition. I know there's a net zero plan of around 2060. I don't know how concretely the government wants to achieve that, but we need to be sure what we are doing. If we're investing heavily in refineries, that means we don't have any hopes of leaving this soon. Obviously, it's not realistic to leave it now, but we need to be sure that we're on that path going forward, because investment in renewables, for me, I think is a win-win for us. We have the natural resource to do that. Even in terms of producing the solar panels, we can do that and have a huge market that empowers people, that creates jobs, that really makes us a huge attractive investment opportunity for this. I think the governments across all levels, both subnational and the national, should really look at this to invest and create jobs for people, but also provide solid power for the country.
Well said, Chigozie. Well said. I heard from you how the government can invest in renewable energy resources like solar, and of course, you mentioned wind, which is, I feel like that's the least thing people usually talk about when we look at renewable energy. Everybody's like solar, but you mentioned that we can actually use our space to generate energy, and you also talk about waste management, which is going to lead me to the next question. I'm going to be directing this to Leye and Doing Solar. So any of you can actually go first. So I would like to know, how would proper waste management, especially e-waste and chemical waste, help make the city of Lagos a cleaner city?
Of course, proper waste management will make every city cleaner and healthier. So it's not just cleaner, it also makes it healthier. But if you look around yourself, if you look around us, the challenge is not just on chemical waste or electronic waste, as like you said. The challenge is in the waste itself. So you have the degradable waste, you have the recyclable waste, you have the plastic waste, you have the electronic waste, you have the chemical waste, you have the hazardous waste. You just have all of this waste. Now, if you also look at it in the right context, you will realize that the concept of waste management is not just all the challenge we're facing with waste management is not just peculiar to Nigeria, it's not just peculiar to developing economy, but it's a global phenomenon. I don't know if you've been to California itself, there's a certain part in California that you will like ask yourself that we've not seen this on CNN. If you go to downtown Baltimore, in Maryland, you will ask yourself, wow, we've not seen this on CNN, like real dirty areas. Now, people living with waste. And it's just like that everywhere. But what is the cause of this? As population grows, consumption rate increases. The infrastructure to collect waste decreases. So the waste will start to consume all of us. And it's just a typical example of what we're seeing today. So for us to deal with this, we need to leverage on the growth of sectors like technology and investment. And particularly that's how we've come now with PACAM to make sense of waste. In doing that, what we try to do is to look at it in such a way that it should not just be a government problem. And that's where we have always been across the world. Government has always been the one solving waste. And of course, government is also a reflection of the socio-economic development. Government is us. And so the way we think is the same government we think. So they don't have any supernatural, they're not supernatural being. They will know that, oh, these are. So it dawns on us that we can all come together to solve this. And how can we come together? Bring the people who are generating the waste. Bring the people who are doing the waste business in terms of collection. And bring the people who are regulating the ecosystem together. So how can we make sense in such a way that the people who are generating this waste can get incentive for sorting their waste from source? Because that is even the core of the problem. The medical waste, the electronic waste, the hazardous waste, the recyclable, everything is just jam-packed together. Now, this thing also goes to the landfill. Now, the landfill is also breeding scavengers. Oh, they are sorting all of this waste from there. Then the rain will fall. Then, the chemical component of this waste will also go into the soil, damage the soil, find its way to the water bodies, pollute the water bodies. It becomes a vicious cycle of challenges. But when these things are sought from source, and those ones that can go back into the economy are being bought from source, have you not created a situation whereby the generator is now making sense of his waste, now getting money for his waste? We target energy waste. And those other type of waste that, of course, they cannot make sense of, that has to go to landfill, that would degenerate, and they pay for such waste to be collected. Then you say PSP waste. And you have a situation whereby you're not waiting to the end of the month for PSP to come and collect your waste. Your waste is now going to be on pay on demand or pick up on demand. You've made sense of those ways. You've created job for the collectors to be able to collect. The collectors can now work with a system that is now digitally assigned system whereby they know where their waste are in real time. They can collect those waste in real time, get paid in real time. And government also have data to also plan for waste to know, okay, you know what? We're doing more, these people are generating more of this type of waste here. We need to deploy these resources here, and not just buying all of these vehicles. Because, like I said, even the vehicle that is flying on the road, all those trailers and whatsoever, they are also emitting. So you are using one problem to solve another problem, creating another problem. So we need to look at all of these things and see how we come together within the ecosystem, the generators, the collectors, and government who is regulating it to create a system whereby is a win-win for all of us, and that is just what we are pushing out at Packham. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, you talked about how we can put infrastructure in place to collect this waste, and you also said something which I think Lagosians will be so. I don't know how far this has gone because the policy for pay as you waste, how far has it gone, and what's the reception of Lagosians towards this?
So the concept of pay as you waste has always been part of us. Our mother did it, our grandmother did it. Some of us that lived in Ijebu, we saw how it goes, even to clothing and all that. But so it's not new. We're just trying to modernize it to make it more impactful, then to push it across board. Now, one of the challenge, in any innovation, there also comes with challenge, and one of the challenge that we faced is still lack of infrastructure. So you will hear on radio, you will hear everywhere, as if Lagos State has multiple collectors or multiple recyclers. But the answer is no. So there's also another challenge in the ecosystem because in the ecosystem there's so much money going around. We also have a lot of people that are doing photoshops and they're able to also collect money. Now the business is no longer sustainable. So what we are trying to also now fix now to ensure that this can go statewide is to ensure that we create infrastructure for collections in every ward in Lagos. Now, if there is infrastructure for collection in every ward in Lagos, what are we going to achieve? Waste scarcity, which means as people are generating this waste, they can always schedule for their waste to be picked up or they can always schedule for their waste to be dropped off. So either way, they're making money from their waste and they're happy. Cleaner environment, more money to people, and everybody wins.
I mean, it's a win-win situation right there. I'm going to move to doing solar. What are some of the challenges that you've observed when we look at waste management in Lagos? What are the challenges you observe that the state is facing, and how can this be addressed?
Thank you so much. One of the major challenges that we're facing in Lagos as recyclers, as PSP operators, is the issue of traffic. Lagos has so many people, and we all know that because we all lived here. We all live here, and we experience traffic. Yesterday, I think I was going to Ikeja. It took about 3 hours. So you can imagine if we need to pick up waste from a particular part of Lagos, and then we're going to take it to either the factory or the dump site, depending on the type of waste it is, and then you're spending 7 hours for just one trip. So that already creates a backlog. And if you do that again and again, there's already a backlog building. So that's one of the major issues. Now, when this backlog starts to build, you start to see a lot of people that are frustrated because, oh, my waste is here, you've not come to pick up. Why haven't you come to pick up? Because there's a lot of traffic. That's one issue that we're having in Lagos. Another issue we're having are I like to call them the good boys on the road. For example, if you pick up recyclables worth plus minus what 2,000 naira, and then you get to a bus stop or an area and they stop you and they collect 8,000 naira from you daily. At the end of the day, it starts to become frustrating and it frustrates the business because in as much as people are willing and able to pick out these recyclables or the type of material generated, it's not sustainable going to some areas. Sometimes they even become violent as well. That's another thing. Another thing that we're dealing with is the fact that people do not want to pay for their non-recyclable waste. So instead of paying for the PSP to come and pick up. They will rather either burn it, they either bury it, or they just chuck it into the drainage system, which I feel is even the worst of all of it, because anything that goes into the drainage system and blocks the drainage creates flooding for all of us. It just doesn't create flooding. It now goes into the canal system and then it gets into the ocean. Once it gets into the ocean, you find that it starts to pollute our water bodies, and then it starts to affect the marine life in the ocean. So these are some of the challenges that we're facing on the daily. These are constant challenges that we're facing, and I hope and pray that most of these things will be solved in the nearest future.
Thanks for highlighting the fact that some of this waste actually goes back into the environment, cause flood, and also affects the marine life. Because most people, when we talk about waste, we usually don't really look at the marine life, and that's because most people feel like they don't usually depend on marine activities and all of that. So thanks for mentioning that, doing solar. So I'll be moving this next question to Shegun. I know you talked about how you went into a certain environment to sensitize the people. So I'm asking you, how can waste management system in Lagos be made more inclusive, particularly for marginalized communities?
All right, thank you for that question. So I believe for marginalized communities, I think Lagos State is, in a way, they privatized waste management. But we really need to settle the scores in between the interaction. So I think the government has created a system of waste collection. So Loma is in charge of waste management. Loma has designated various contractors under PSP, in the name of PSP, to go to these various locations to pick up this waste. And people are meant to pay
For everything. So how do we convert our waste and make sense of it?
I thank you. I think in the situation like this, we need challenges with waste, which is true. Is one of the contributions. But the truth is also the fact that waste must be localized. You cannot pick waste in Ikeja and you're taking it to VI. Waste in Ikeja must stay in Ikeja. Waste in VI must stay in VI. So the infrastructure for waste in Ikeja should include recycling, composting, incineration, or material recovery center. Now, those will serve Ikeja. Those will serve VI. Those will serve, that is the localization. But for you to collect waste from one area and you are it cannot work. It will not work. It does not make sense. It will never make sense. Another thing, which is also the issue of the good boys on the road. We are in an environment where these people strive, and there's nothing we can probably do. And so it's also done on us that one of our own contribution to them is to be able to create a system where we can also employ them. Now, if these guys can get within our ecosystem where they can gainfully work and go home with something in which waste has the biggest potential to create employment, either in recycling, either in collection, either in composting. It's just so enormous.
For everything. So how do we convert our waste and make sense of it?
I thank you. I think in the situation like this, we seriously need to give context to it, and also giving context to what we're doing. We also seriously need to look at it in that more another angle. If you tell a child, "Do not pee here," and there is no toilet, that one of our own contribution to them is to be able to create a system where we can also employ them. Now, if these guys can get within our ecosystem where they can gainfully work and go home with something in which waste has the biggest potential to create employment, either in recycling, either in collection, either in composting, it's just so enormous. But we have not even tapped 1% into that. Will these guys still be disturbing? An idle hand is the devil's workshop. So if they are idle, we will still have them. Then let me now also go to the concept of understanding it from another angle. If you tell a child, "Do not pee here," and there is no toilet where the child will pee, what would the child do? He will pee there. And you will beat the child, and you beat the child, and you say, don't pee again. And there's no toilet, and it's locked up there, it will pee there. That's just how it is. If there are no infrastructure, in which I will still tell you it's a zero, there's nothing we can do. People will still improvise. Some of the areas that my friend just spoke about are okay, maybe this area is clean, maybe this area is clean. Chunk of them are being collected by the informal sector. And when the informal sector also collects it, there is no material recovery center they will take it to. What will they take it to? They will go and pour it into the drainage. They've collected money from the house owner, but they will pour it into the drainage, they will pour it into the water body. And that is also why the rain will fall. The drainages are blocked and water will enter into the. So, just like also my friend said, the issue about waste is not just one way forward. It is so dynamic, it is so into each other that you need to sit down, understand it, digest it, and know how to tailor your solution into that. And as regard the policy, in all honesty, I've not seen any policy, but I've had there probably policy. If those policy comes out, we're also working tirelessly to ensure that this policy human face, so that we don't put the round peg in square hole. So the people who understand the ecosystem need to be able to articulate this policy to government. So work with them to articulate this policy so that at the end of the day, we can create a system that is sustainable, that can profit them, that can profit the environment, and that can profit everybody. The environment, businesses, and the stakeholders. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that contribution. So, because we're really, really time conscious right now, I would like for anybody that has questions, you can raise up your hand and probably give access for you to ask your questions. I mean, the speakers are here to attend to those questions you have. Any question from people in the house, in the space? I mean, let's make this more interactive. I've been the one asking all the questions. I'm not the only Lagosian, Abba.
Hello, good evening, guys. I am Yetunde Gold. I don't have a question. I just have something to say about what Mr. Adele just said now. I do not agree with what he said last, saying the good boys are entitled to, these things, because at the end of the day, up and coming recyclers that are just starting, how do you expect them to make profit when you say the good boys have to take something from what they just got? I remember saying something about, okay, imagine you going to go and pack stuffs or waste for about 2,000 naira, and these good boys come and say, no, they're taking 10,000 naira from you. We have to create a very, very fair system for everyone to thrive. Not saying some people have to, some people are entitled to what they are not. I would appreciate that we do not, support these kind of things. However, we can educate them and tell them, you know what, you can also make money for yourself. Tell your neighbors, gather people in your compound. You guys should take the plastics, take things. We can recycle and make money. But not you telling them that, oh, they have to, always, recyclers have to always pay these people. They are not entitled to it. So I just want to say we should encourage such acts. Instead, we should find a way, to bring them into the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yetunde. Thank you for that contribution. Mr. Leo, what do you have to say in regards to the good boys that you're encouraging?
Yeah,
Because
thank
Yetunde is not having it.
Yeah, so I think maybe Yetunde Go didn't hear me well. I did not say they are entitled. Anybody that knows me, like, I don't like people that are entitled. I like people that work hard to earn. I said they are part of our socio-economic development. We cannot throw them away. But it is left for us to also be able to integrate them into our ecosystem through employment. Those were my words. And I will also give example. So my former office was in Surulere, and we have some good boys also that will come and harass us. So one day I reached out to them and said, okay, you know what? Why don't you make sense out of the waste this your hospital is generating? Collect. And the guy said, I don't have the smartphone. Or what do you think? I said, don't worry, we're going to do a USSD code, but for now, collect smartphone from one of your friends. And as I'm talking to you today, he called me the day before yesterday and he said, and I have 30,000 naira. Thank you. Now, did you see that impact? He will probably go to his house in Songo and still tell his wife, oh, let's do this. And still tell. So those are the kind of integration that I was talking about. Not that the good boy should come and say, never and never. No, I didn't support that.
Okay. Stella has put a clean slate out there. Yetunde. Is that okay? Is that a good response for you?
Yes, please. I mean, I heard what he said earlier, but this one he said now is different. So I would agree with him right now.
Uh, this means that education is actually still important for people to be educated on how to manage the waste. And of course, I'm going to take the word from Leia's word, make sense of waste, meaning they can earn money from actually putting their waste together and selling it back for it to be useful to the society. So I have just few moments to spend here. I'm going to be directing my question to Chigozie. I know you've been quiet for a long time. So we're looking at the nation. I mean, last year, the nation experienced flood crisis, and Lagos was actually preparing to experience theirs. But we experienced it, but not as bad as some other places in Nigeria. So, with Lagos being one of these few states that restricted such scenario, what steps should be taken in place to avoid such issues around flood? I mean, it's still going to rain this year, and we're expecting that it's going to rain heavily. So, what do you think can be put in place just to protect the environment?
Yeah, thank you, and really great to listen to the previous speakers. I'm really excited to know a lot of the initiatives that are going on there in Lagos. Around the flood across the country, last year at some point we had over 600 people who lost their life in terms of the heavy floods in different areas. There's also the internally displaced people who have constantly, been victims of this year after year. They are the basics that we can do. First, of course, you look at the drainages to make sure they are clean, but even that is not enough. The sea levels are rising. You would expect that the floods will consistently be coming. I think for the last decade, I guess, we've been having incessant floods every year on a consistent basis. The priority would be to save lives. It is important that we actually put value on human lives. If there's a warning from the national agency, the NIMET, it goes out very early every year. We have this always. We know it's coming. There's enough information to the state government from the federal government. It's important that at the level of the subnational governments that they actually make concrete plans to first of all save lives. We cannot be losing lives to floods at this time. It is primitive in most sense. Of course, if something is immediate, is unforeseen in many respects, yes, you can understand that, but not when a flood is forecasted for many months and nothing is done, and then it comes and gets people trapped in. Secondly, in Lagos, the city is so built up in many corners that the wetlands are not sufficiently there to absorb the water. The drainages are sometimes filled up and not allowing water access to pass through. These things has to be taken care of just before the rains start to come in full flow. I think this is the residents of Lagos need to do a lot more. First of all, to do their part to make sure that the drainages are not filled up, but secondly, to really understand that these floodings are not the norm. They must demand more of their public officials to make sure that this is prioritized in terms of how does the government look at the water channels and the water that comes from the lagoon at their embankments. Because I said earlier in the start of this of the session that Lagos is a climate adaptation disaster that is waiting to happen if something is not done at the scale that is required. Because you require various climate resilient infrastructure in a city like Lagos to make sure that in the future there would be no complications in terms of how people and the city coexist. You have to plan, of course, as you're planning to have infrastructure, you are planning the nature around the infrastructure. You are watching how the underground water is being taken care of vis-a-vis the fresh water around the system. When you're sand filling to build island, you are looking at how it balances up with the rest of the water, because you can never beat nature. It may take years, but it's going to come back in full force and it's going to destroy everything. So we have to be very careful how we deal with this. There's the problem of waste management, individual problem that each resident has to take care of, but that is not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is in terms of planning the city, we have to be very careful how we plan the city. If we need to make embankments to have water breaks that stop water flowing into the city when there is excess overflow of the riverbanks or high level sea rise, we need to put this embankment to make sure that they are able to stop the water in many folds, or at least to reduce the pressures such that they are not able to carry away people or destroy houses or things like this. Because when you look at the city, both in the rich areas and the other areas on the mainland, floods are entering people's houses, destroying people's passports, properties, and everything. It's not it's not ideal in that sense. And at the national level, of course, the government has to do a lot more. Uh, you give warnings, yes, that's fine, but you need to really go beyond that to do concrete work. There's the early warning systems that has to be improved. When giving warnings is not enough. What are you telling the farmers? What are you telling everybody in each sector? What should they be doing? Where should they cultivate their crops so they don't get losses this year? You can't have a farmer plant acres of land and then have a flood wash away everything. They lose all their livelihoods, get into an IDP camp, have kids there, their children don't go to school. You're creating a disaster across the whole community, because in years to come, you're creating a security risk. You have out of school children, the economy is not going to function. You don't have people to drive the industries that you have. So we're going to have a big problem in this sense. I don't think that we have enough adaptation plan at a national level to really address this risk. I know that the country is probably at the stage of developing a national adaptation plan, but I think it's too late in that respect. I look at the access of climate finance across the GCF and also the adaptation fund, and I see that a country like Nigeria that have a lot of needs around this is not accessing this finance as much as it should. I don't know what the problem is, but that doesn't look good for a country that has so much problems and has this finance waiting, but yet it's not accessing it. So I think we need to be able to develop a solid national adaptation plan that looks at all this risk and how to manage them. We need to prioritize human lives. It's important for me. Climate solutions, first of all, must save lives, and then we can do anything around it, whether we want to do things around livelihood, strengthening the resilience, making sure that health systems are strong. It's important that we save people first, and then we can do the other things. We also need to engage professionals around this. We need to engage professional architects and engineers who really understand how to build climate resilient infrastructure. The roads we build, the drainages, the houses has to be compliant to government plans. And we need to even begin to enforce these plans, because we can no longer leave things to common sense. You cannot rely on people's common sense to have a society function in this respect. So the government has to enforce its master plans as it has them. And Lagos is in a critical situation where the space is limited. So it needs to really maximize, absolutely, the space, both underground and on land. I know we don't do so much with managing space in Nigeria. We feel like we have a lot of space or land, and that is not true. The population is increasing. We need to really manage space as much as possible, and to make sure that we have even enough space for other nature to exist, to make sure we have enough biodiversity within the city. Lagos is not just going to be all skyscrapers and people moving around. You need to coexist with other components of nature, and to also make sure that the infrastructure is resilient, whether it's the health systems, it's the education system, that the rain is not disrupting the education of people, both university and other levels. And also the protection system, that people who are vulnerable, people who are living in the riverine communities are also taken care of as part of this plan. So I think for now we are in April, getting into May. It's not too late to really do grand action to make sure that we don't lose lives again this year to floods.
All right. You said quite a lot there, and I'm sure that Lagos is listening, and they'll definitely look into all of these suggestions. So it's an open space, guys. Any contribution or questions you would like to ask or anything you'd like to add to what Chigozie have just said? And in regards to this question, I'm also going to ask, are there cities that you've observed that they have a sustainable waste management system that is functional? I mean, when you look at the city, you see that their implementation is successful. And what lesson do you think can be learned from that? This is an open question for everyone in this space. So if you have a response, you can just identify and give answers, because this will be the last question. Doisola, do you have anything you'd like to say, last word, in regards to waste management in Lagos State, and what lesson you think we can learn from other cities who have successfully implemented a sustainable waste management system?
I would just like to just support what I heard from Chigozie, because one thing he said actually struck me, and that's the value for life. Because if you check the conversation on normal Twitter space, you see a lot of wondered, you see a lot of people connecting. But this topic is just, I think this topic is not, this climate change discussion, environment, waste management discussion is not at the top of people's minds, because as a Nigerian, average Nigerian, you are looking for how to survive the next day, how to plan yourself. Either some people are planning to jackpot, some people are trying to stay, get that income. So no one is really looking at the environment, and nobody's looking at what's going to happen in the future. Nobody really cares the long term. Nobody's looking at the future generations and whatever we are doing in the environment. So I believe that I'll just contribute that the government has to do its own. We've talked about what the government needs to do all through the space, but we also need to take the action individually. We need to be the change that we want in the environment. So that's where I come in, because I remember I have a particular a personal experience. So in my house, I started a recycling. I started a plastic, I'll say a waste management system where we throw our plastics and into the normal bin, and we dispose it in the dump site. But I was like, oh, can we just start separating the bottles, keeping them in a particular space? I aim to take it to my estate and make it more like a larger collection system. But the issue here is we didn't get guys to come. I reached out to people. I already had people who would come collect it, but when it was time to pick up, I had a lot of plastics taking up a lot of space, and at the point in time I even thought I was going to stop. But one thing I noticed from the whole experience is that my family became very conscious. That even when I thought I was going to stop it, when I sold off the first set of bottles I collected, about 1,500, they automatically continued doing it by themselves. So it became a part of them. So that is where we need to become the ambassadors of change, or the news we want to spread, or the change we want to come in terms of climate change and climate activism. So we need to take that message to our family members, our office, tell people stop dropping that bottle anywhere. You can drop it in the right designated bin for plastics. We need to do it every day to everyone beside us. So I think with that way, why we push the government to do and set the policies and do the infrastructures around waste management and climate change, we are on our own end. We're also doing the grassroots mobilization and getting people to become conscious about it. So that's all I wanted to contribute.
All right, thank you so much for that contribution. I mean, you're talking about keeping this conversation going, and we at ATR were reporting on technology advancement, and for some of these ways we can actually implement things this conversation is always ongoing on our websites. We have podcasts. We've had people come over to ATR to actually talk about this climate change situation, and it's still going to be a conversation we keep recording on. So I would encourage for everyone to please follow at Africa Tech Radio, ATR. We actually have a lot of great content for you guys, and we look forward to also having some of the speakers over here to actually speak with us on things that they are working on. I mean, after this place, we should not stop the conversation, because it's not just a one-time conversation and expect change. It should be a continuous conversation. So it would be good for us to follow Africa Tech Radio. And of course, SDG. Don't forget to follow Lagos State's SDG page. They have some plans also, not just in climate change, and they are taking note of everything that the speakers have actually talked about. So follow them so that you can keep tab. You can drag them that, see, you talked about this. We actually spoke on this and you said you would make changes or adjustments. So what's really happening? Hold them accountable for their words and promises. So it's be good to follow them on social media also. I want to appreciate all the speakers from Shigoze to Doing to Shegun and of course Leye. I appreciate your time and contribution to this space. There's been a lot of knowledge shared here. We can't pay for that. We can't. So a massive thank you to each and every one of you for your time. And of course, everyone that made out time to join this space. Thank you so much for joining. I hope this was as educational as it could be to you. Anyone want to say something? Last word? I mean, for me, I got a lot of knowledge from the speakers. I don't know about you.
I'm really happy to be here. Great to see the interest in the conversation and everybody in, and also happy to see the interest from all the stakeholders, both the government and the private sector, and also the civil society as well. I think it's important to keep the pressure on, demand as much as possible from the government, and also do our part as individuals and other stakeholders.
All right, thank you. Leia, you wanted to say something?
Yes, as in relation to your question about which state is doing more. There's this adage in Yoruba that will say "Odoju kan nilo afoju," which means a one-eye person in the village of the blind. So that is where Lagos State is now. But if you also then go to other states, which we've been to, Ogun State, or your state, as I'm talking to you now, we're in Anambra. We're having consultation tomorrow. You will also appreciate Lagos, even though we've not gotten there. We've not even gotten to 40% of it. So, and that is where we should appreciate that this is not just a problem of government, but is a collective problem that we all need to solve. But because government is at the aim of at the top of everything, they need to open up the space so that more investors can come in. Let it be private driven and government regulated. And I think that is the only advice I can give. Government must open up the space for private investors to come in. It should not be for political patronage.
All right, thank you so much for that. At least that's a good one to wrap up with. Any other person want to make contribution to what the whole conversation we've had for the last 1 hour?
Yeah, good evening. It was really great. I think I learned a lot. I just wanted to say we've been involved in this climate change waste management discourse for a while, and I realized that especially when you do grassroots mobilization, community-based mobilization in rural areas, you understand that people don't really understand this stuff. People don't know what we're talking about because it seems very complex to them, especially when you're talking about climate change. So, I've always suggested that we break this thing down, and just like how we did with, or how we do when it comes to political campaigns and all that, we break it down, take it to communities in their languages, go to secondary schools, and then create grassroots, especially in our educational system, secondary schools, primary schools. Let them understand this so our culture will change. Somebody said people are more concerned when you talk about climate change, gas emissions and all that. People ask you, how does this affect the price of Gary? Because people don't really understand, and then, but when we break it down and then we try to make people see reasons in their language, you come down, break it down, and I think it will help us to now create a structure, or rather a culture, that from childhood people will begin to learn, this is what waste management is about. These are the things I should do that will help improve our climate and all that. I just think we should bring it down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I mean, people would understand more and connect more when things are being spoken in their language and simplified to how they can understand how it's relative to them and how it affects them and the society at large. Thank you so much for that contribution. That was really good. Yes, that was really a great one and a good way to wrap. So whatever we're doing, let's find the language to connect with the people, and of course, keep the education rolling, keep the awareness, keep the sensitization rolling, and of course, like I said, don't forget to follow the Lagos State SDG account on social media. because they keep reporting all of these developmental goals that they're implementing in the society. And when they're not implementing it enough, I think we can also drop some contributions for them on their comments or in their DMs. They are quick to respond to any message. So it would be great for every one of us to follow them and see what they've been up to and what they're about. And of course, don't forget to follow at Africa Tech Radio, guys. I'm telling you, the conversation doesn't stop with just the Twitter spaces. We have amazing list of content on our website on www.africatechradio.com. And we also have live streaming, and we usually bring awesome guests, like some of the speakers that you've had on this space today can actually be a potential guest for us if they are open to that. I'm just actually patronizing you all, but then we've always had conversation on climate change, and we still keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for your time. I think we've spent quite a lot of time, guys. So thank you so much, and it's of course from me to you. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.